All right, so today we're doing something a bit different, something you might not expect.
Hmm, intriguing. I'm all ears.
We're going on a trip to the supermarket.
Now that sounds familiar. I do enjoy a good grocery run. What's the twist?
Well, not for groceries, exactly. More like a deep dive into what we can learn about language and even culture just by taking a closer look at this everyday place.
I never thought of it that way, but you're right. Supermarkets are full of unspoken rules and hidden meanings.
Exactly. And our guide for this journey is an episode of English Explorations with Brian and Natasha. They do a fantastic job breaking down practical English skills, and their episode on supermarkets is packed with useful vocabulary. But we're going to use it as a starting point to go a little deeper.
I love it. Taking something familiar and uncovering all these hidden layers. It's like cultural archaeology.
Right, so let's follow their lead and start at the entrance, the produce section.
Ah, yes. All those vibrant colors and fresh smells. A feast for the senses.
Brian and Natasha make an interesting point about the word produce itself.
Oh, that's right. They talk about how it's a collective term for fruits and vegetables. It's something that native speakers use naturally, but can be a bit tricky for language learners.
I can see that. It's one of those subtle distinctions that can easily trip you up. They also mention organic produce, which I think is a great jumping off point for a wider conversation.
Absolutely. The way a supermarket presents organic produce tells us a lot about the values of the community it serves. Is it a tiny section hidden away, or are there entire aisles dedicated to organic options?
Right, right. It reflects the level of awareness around health and environmental issues.
Exactly. And think about the local economy. Maybe there's a strong farming tradition in the area, or a network of local farms supplying the supermarket.
That makes sense. It's a whole ecosystem, really.
And how about the way organic produce is presented? Are there big signs touting its benefits, or is it just mixed in with everything else? It's a subtle way the supermarket itself is shaping consumer choices.
So we're seeing cultural values, economic factors, and marketing strategies all playing out in the produce section alone. Pretty amazing, right?
It's like a microcosm of the larger system.
Speaking of systems, Brian and Natasha then move on to the dairy aisle. They point out all the different milk options you have nowadays.
Yeah.
Whole milk, skim milk, and of course all those plant-based alternatives.
Oh, yes. There's almond milk, soy milk, oat milk. The list goes on. I must admit, I'm partial to oat milk myself. It has this lovely, creamy texture.
I'm more of a traditionalist. Cow's milk for me, thanks.
Yeah.
But you're right, the rise of plant-based milks really reflects a shift in dietary preferences.
Absolutely. It's not just about health anymore. There are ethical considerations, environmental concerns, and even, I dare say, a sense of adventure in trying new things.
I can see that, especially with younger generations. They're really thinking about what aligns with their values. And speaking of indulging the senses, that brings us to another highlight from Brian and Natasha. The bakery.
Ah, yes, the bakery. The smell of fresh bread is irresistible. It's like a primal instinct. Tell me about it. I could spend hours in that aisle just inhaling the aroma.
Brian and Natasha actually mentioned that in-house bakeries in supermarkets are a relatively recent development.
Really? That's interesting.
It got me thinking, is this truly a new thing, or are we seeing a resurgence of traditional practices, a longing for that old-fashioned artisanal touch?
That's a great question. It could be a bit of both, couldn't it?
Right. Supermarkets are responding to this desire for fresh, handcrafted products while also catering to our busy modern lives. It's creating an experience that goes beyond just grabbing a loaf of bread.
So it's not just about the product itself, it's about the whole experience, the sights, the smells, the feeling of connection to something real.
Exactly. And that curated experience extends to other sections of the supermarket too. Just think about the layout. Produce is usually at the entrance with those vibrant colors and fresh smells to entice us.
And then, conveniently located nearby, the bakery with all those tempting aromas wafting through the air.
It's almost like a carefully designed path to guide our choices. A supermarket symphony for the senses.
And let's not forget the dairy aisle with its ever-expanding array of plant-based milks. That's another sign of the changing times, isn't it? What was once a niche market is now mainstream, reflecting concerns about health, ethics, and the environment.
It really makes you think about how even the most basic products in the supermarket are laden with cultural significance.
Speaking of cultural significance, Brian and Natasha then venture into a section that can be a bit daunting for some: meat and seafood.
Oh, yes. That can definitely be intimidating. all those unfamiliar cuts and varieties.
They emphasize the importance of asking questions, especially for language learners.
I remember when I first moved abroad, I was so terrified of mispronouncing things or sounding foolish that I just point and gesture rather than actually try to speak.
It's a common experience. But as Brian and Natasha point out, asking questions is crucial for building confidence and expanding your vocabulary. And even native speakers might need help sometimes in this section.
Right. The language can get pretty specialized, whether you're talking about cuts of beef or types of shellfish. It's a good reminder that learning is an ongoing process, no matter your language level. And from the meat and seafood counter, we journey to the land of convenience. The frozen food aisle.
Ah, frozen food. The mixed blessing of modern life.
Brian and Natasha highlighted its practicality, especially for busy lifestyles. And I have to admit, even I rely on it sometimes. But it's interesting to think about how the rise of frozen food reflects larger societal changes.
Absolutely. It goes hand in hand with the shift toward convenience and efficiency. Smaller portions, ready-to-eat meals, even the packaging reflects our changing relationship with food.
I never thought about it that way. It's about more than just convenience. It's about our evolving priorities and the trade-offs we make.
Exactly. It raises some interesting questions about what we gain and what we lose in our pursuit of efficiency.
It does, doesn't it? Food for thought indeed. And speaking of final destinations, let's head to the checkout, the last stop on our supermarket tour. What insights did Brian and Natasha offer about this crucial interaction?
Well, they emphasized the importance of those polite phrases. Do you need a bag? Thank you. Have a nice day. But they also highlighted something I think is a great opportunity for language practice, giving personal information.
You mean when they're asked if they have a loyalty card?
Exactly. It might seem simple, but it involves providing your name, maybe your phone number or email address.
And maybe answering a few questions about your shopping habits.
Right. It's a perfect chance for language learners to practice those real-world communication skills. And it raises some interesting questions about data collection and consumer tracking, but maybe we'll save that for another deep dive.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground in just the first part of our supermarket exploration. We've seen how this seemingly mundane space is actually a fascinating tapestry of language, culture, and even a bit of psychology.
Absolutely, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface. There are so many more layers to uncover.
Can't wait to dive deeper in part 2. We'll be back soon to continue our exploration.
Looking forward to it. Until then, happy shopping, everyone.
Welcome back to our supermarket safari. We're on a mission to uncover the hidden meanings and cultural clues tucked away in those aisles.
It's amazing how much we can learn about ourselves and the world around us just by looking at the supermarket with fresh eyes. So what other gems did you spot as we journeyed through the supermarket with Brian and Natasha from English Explorations?
Well, I keep thinking about their comment about in-house bakeries being a relatively new trend. It makes me wonder, is it really new, or is it a return to something older?
That's an interesting thought. I mean, for centuries, local bakeries were the heart of a community, right? Everyone gathered there for fresh bread, pastries. It was a social hub.
Exactly. And maybe supermarkets are trying to tap into that, recreate that sense of community, that connection to tradition. It's like they're bringing back a piece of the past, making grocery shopping more than just a chore.
Right. And it connects to what we were discussing about organic produce. It's not just about the product itself, it's about the experience surrounding it. Supermarkets are becoming these carefully curated destinations designed to appeal to our senses and emotions.
So it's not just grabbing a loaf of bread. It's about the smell of yeast wafting through the air, the sight of those artisan loaves cooling on the racks. It's transporting us to a different time and place.
Precisely. And this curated experience, it extends to other sections as well. Like, think about the layout of the supermarket. Produce is often right at the entrance.
With all those vibrant colors, those fresh smells appealing to our senses right away.
Exactly. And then often nearby, you have the bakery enticing us with the aroma of those freshly baked goods. It's like a carefully choreographed dance.
Leading us through the store, subtly influencing our choices. It's fascinating.
It really is. And let's not forget the dairy aisle, right?
Yeah.
Brian and Natasha pointed out the growing popularity of plant-based milk.
Which is a huge shift, wouldn't you say? It's not just a niche market anymore, it's mainstream.
And it reflects a changing cultural landscape, right? Concerns about health, ethics, the environment, all of these factors are driving this shift.
It makes me wonder what other seemingly mundane products in the supermarket are actually packed with cultural significance.
Well, think about the meat and seafood section, right? That's where Brian and Natasha really emphasize the importance of asking questions, especially for language learners.
Oh, I remember feeling so lost in the meat section when I first moved abroad. I had no clue what to ask for. All those different cuts were so confusing.
It's a common experience. But beyond the language barrier, this section can also reveal a lot about cultural preferences and economic realities. What types of meat are readily available? Are there exotic or specialty cuts? Is seafood a prominent feature? It all reflects the culinary traditions of the region, the purchasing power of the average shopper.
It's like looking at a snapshot of the community's diet and economic landscape, all within a refrigerated display case. Amazing. What about the frozen food aisle? I'm curious to hear your take on that.
Well, Brian and Natasha focused on the convenience factor, which is obviously a huge driver of its popularity. But I think there's a deeper layer here, right? The rise of frozen food, it mirrors the rise of busy lifestyles, the need for quick meal solutions. It's a reflection of how our relationship with food has changed over time.
You're right. In a way, frozen food represents our desire for efficiency, for control over our lives. We can stock our freezers with pre-portioned meals, ready to go at a moment's notice.
It's a far cry from the days of, planning meals around seasonal harvests or spending hours preparing elaborate dishes.
It's fascinating and a bit unsettling at the same time, isn't it? We've gained convenience, but maybe lost some of that connection to our food, to the rhythms of nature.
Lots to ponder there for sure. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm struck by how much we've discovered just by shifting our perspective.
It's true. We started by exploring supermarket English, and we've uncovered so much more cultural trends, economic influences, even some philosophical questions about our relationship with food.
It's incredible what you can learn when you start paying attention to the details, right?
Absolutely. And there's still so much more to uncover. We'll continue our exploration in part 3, where we'll delve even deeper into the hidden messages embedded in those supermarket aisles. Welcome back for the final leg of our supermarket journey. I'm really enjoying looking at this everyday place with new eyes.
Me too, and I'm excited to see what other insights we can unearth as we continue our deep dive. What really strikes me is how the supermarket acts as this mirror, reflecting larger societal shifts.
Oh, that's interesting. I see what you mean.
Remember when we were talking about the meat and seafood section with Brian and Natasha? They gave those great tips for language learners on how to ask for things. But the variety of what's there, how it's presented, that tells a story, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You were saying it reflects the community's culinary traditions and their economic situation?
Right. But it's even more nuanced than that, I think. Are there tons of prepackaged, ready-to-cook options? Or is it more about fresh ingredients that need more prep time?
Yeah. That does say something about the pace of life there, how much value people place on convenience.
Exactly. And maybe even the level of cooking skills in the community.
I can almost picture two different supermarkets now. One catering to busy urbanites, all grab-and-go meals and pre-chopped veggies, and another one with a huge butcher counter and a fishmonger who knows everyone by name.
That's a great way to put it. And that contrast, it plays out in other sections too. Think about frozen food. Brian and Natasha highlighted how convenient it is, but...
It's gone way beyond just basic staples, hasn't it?
Right. Now you can find whole cuisines in the frozen food aisle, meals for every kind of diet, even gourmet dishes that are supposed to be as good as a restaurant.
It's almost like frozen food has become, well, sophisticated.
I know. It's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? Frozen food used to be about compromise. Now it's trying to meet these increasingly high expectations.
It's a reflection of how technology is changing our relationship with food. We want efficiency, we want personalization in every part of our lives.
And the supermarket is adapting to that. But let's not forget, Brian and Natasha weren't just focused on the practical side of things. They also talked about those simple courtesies at the checkout.
Oh, right. You need a bag? Thank you. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Those little things.
It seems small, but it shapes the whole atmosphere, doesn't it? Is it a rushed, impersonal experience, or is there a sense of community there?
It makes a difference. It's like the supermarket is this microcosm of social norms and expectations.
Exactly. And it all goes back to what we were saying earlier. Paying attention to these everyday moments can reveal so much.
It's true. We started with this idea of exploring supermarket English, and we've ended up in such unexpected places. Cultural trends, economic forces, even psychology.
And for our listeners, we hope this inspires you to look at your own surroundings with a fresh perspective, that sense of curiosity. What hidden messages can you find in your daily routines? What stories are your local shops and businesses telling?
Such a great thought. The world is full of these fascinating insights just waiting to be discovered. We hope you've enjoyed this journey with us. Now go out there and explore your world, and who knows, maybe you'll even learn some new vocabulary along the way. Until next time.